cruise ship workers of Reddit. What was the biggest oops moment on the boat that luckily passengers didn't find out about at all? One time I was on a cruise, and a few cabins down a man and woman who were cheating on their wife and husband, respectively, got super drunk and fell over the edge of their balcony from really high up. It was at night too. The whole cruise ship stopped once it was reported, and it took like an entire day to search for them. Apparently the man had his jeans or something, because he had inflated them somehow, and they were floating holding them. They reported that they were stung by multiple jellyfish, and were super cold the whole time. That must have been the scariest, most terrible 18 hours of their lives. Water pipe burst in a storeroom, and soaked all of the spare toilet paper. This was on day 2 of a 14-day voyage to Antarctica. The cabin stewards had to swap around rolls of paper between low-use and high-use guest cabins, and it came right down the wire. None of the guests found out or realized. Now toilet paper is hidden in every cabin instead of a centralized location. Ship just arrived in Whittier, Alaska, the port for anchorage, and an elderly passenger dropped dead while walking down the gangway. A conflict ensues between the port security and the ship's medical team. The port security didn't want the ship's medical team to get involved because it technically happened off the ship and the local authorities had jurisdiction. There really was no saving the guy, but the ship's medical team at least wanted to try, but the local authorities wouldn't even allow the chief medical officer to start CPR. The coroner had a 6-hour eater, so the port authorities bagged up the body and stuffed it in an X-ray machine storage container in port, guarded by local police, until the coroner could arrive to take the body to Anchorage. The wife of the deceased continued on to finish the vacation for the 7-day rail trip to Denali. It was a 14-day gimmick. 7 days at sea, 7-day scenic rail trip. My understanding was the cruise line calmed her entire vacation, arranged for the remains to be returned home at no cost to her, and provided a personal escort/assistant for the remainder of her vacation. I used to be a crew member, and one time a guy working at the front desk jumped overboard after a crew party. He was found a few hours later by the Coast Guard, and everybody was asked to be discreet in order to keep the cruise running smooth. And everything was fine until the captain came on the PA and said we were delayed because a crew member jumped overboard. Then the madness begins. Rumors appear out of nowhere, and the rest of the cruise was pretty much guests asking what happened the whole time. A lot of happens on board. I could write a book, maybe even more than one. Another time a guy committed suicide in his cabin, and his family was on board, including a little girl, but this time it didn't leak to the guests. I saw the family as they were being escorted to the security office. Felt so bad for them. A friend of mine got fired for getting wasted, got pissed and starting peeing all over his cabin while the security guys were there to take care of him. He spent the night in the little jail on board before being dumped the next day in whatever port we were. Also, every time we had ice cream at the crew restaurant, people would say it was because they had to empty the freezer to put a dead body. My oops moment was when I was hired for a ship on 2-day notice trombone player. When I got on the ship I found out that I was replacing a guy who had just died in a jet skiing accident in Nicaragua. Everyone in the crew knew it, and the last cruise's passenger knew it, and the entire band that I was joining was obviously traumatized. In the end, it ended up being my favorite contract, but the first few weeks were difficult for everyone. R.I.P. Bone Guy, I never knew you, but I know they all loved you. I provide software and services for most of the major cruise lines and spend a lot of time cruising. On the new builds is when you see a lot of crazy stuff happening. When a brand new ship is built they have to go through what's called sea trials. This is a full systems check for multiple reasons, biggest ones being safety, emissions, and engine/navigation testing. This happens without passengers, and a lot of stuff breaks usually. They will list the ship, lean it all the way to one side as hard as they can, and hold position while doing a circle or figure 8 pattern in the water. I had a 600-pound wine cooler fully stocked fall face down about 12 away from me while installing a PC at a bar. It sounded like a stick or dynamite exploding from the pressure of all the bottles hitting and simultaneously breaking. I froze staring at it, and as I started to come out of the initial shock, 4 security crew members came running around the corner. No one else around except me, and about 10k in broken wine, and the cooler wasn't cheap either. I just stuck my hands in the air and slowly exited the scene. I'm pretty sure if I was standing 1 foot to the right it wouldn't have been pretty for me. Found out the yard workers forgot to bolt it down as per protocol. Oops. One story that comes to mind with passengers, travel agents and family was the first sailing out of the yard. The ship can hold about 500 passengers. She's a big girl and has 5 or 6 massive engines to power it. About 3 hours into the sail away I heard a loud thump and massive vibrations all around. I was in an empty restaurant and saw plates and cups crashing to the ground from the vibrations. My first thought is to always see how the crew reacts. If they are calm, you can stay. They freak out, you better start moving. I could see some concern, but they continued on with their business. So I followed their lead and continued doing my work too. About 3 to 4 hours after that, another loud thump and even more vibration silence. After speaking with a few crew members, found out we lost 2 engines on the initial incident, and now we just lost the rest. Whatever the reason was, we lost complete propulsion and this beast of a ship was going to go wherever the ocean wanted it to. Passengers were notified that we will be running late, but to continue having fun and drinks were on the house. No other info was given. Smart to avoid panic. About 12 hours later a helicopter was seen early AM hours above us dropping down crates of engine parts, and a short time after that, we had propulsion. Passengers had no idea why we were delayed and didn't seem to care. Somebody shot at the navigation bridge of the ship from the shore on my last ship. The bullet bounced off and hit my colleague on the hand. No real damage, but it scares the hell out of her. Ended up going home for a few weeks. While we waited for the local police to come on and investigate and take statements, guests were told we were delaying the departure to take on fresh water. I'm still shocked that never leaked out. Edit. Oh wow, my highest rated comment ever, and I have no idea if it's because it's my cake day, an unintentional pun, or because people actually found my story interesting. Either way, thanks guys. All of the computer systems run on Windows 7, including all of the automation in the machinery space, security system, fire detection system etc. When Windows updates it will restart the computers, as it does with a normal desktop. Unfortunately it can also take out every computer at the same time and we are flying blind until it finishes. People may be more worried to hear that there is a hole in the hull, yet they are actually fairly common occurrences in older ships and easily plugged. Fires happen occasionally. The most terrifying was a crankcase explosion. The fire suppression systems are good at extinguishing them quickly enough though, so they are not even a concern to the crew, unless Windows is updating at the time. Edit. A crankcase explosion doesn't mean the engine is in pieces. Oil mist inside the crankcase explodes, and the resulting blast is pushed out through the blast doors. Also the fire suppression system is independent. That was a joke. The monitoring system is Windows based and just means we can't see what sensors or which sprinklers have been activated. The speed and fueling controls on an engine are mechanical and the local control is pneumatic, so keeping it running isn't a concern. All of the auxiliary systems are controlled by the computer system and are passed into local control and controlled by the watchkeeper if and when it occurs. There are small fires in places like the kitchens that happen somewhat regularly. Most of the time they are controlled quickly and no one even knows they happened. People drop dead all the time, especially on some of the nicer lines that are basically floating retirement homes. Ironically, it's when there's a survivable medical emergency that guests become aware of it, when they need to do an emergency evacuation either by tender boat or helicopter. One of the ships I worked on, a guest jumped off an open deck while we were at sea. He survived though. I think he was super drunk more than he was suicidal. Norovirus outbreaks happen regularly. That a literal oops moment for some people. Edit. Probably the worst accident that happened during my tenure was when a kid literally put his eye out on a ball valve handle on one of the open decks. Pretty sure word spread quickly on that one though. Edit 2. Sorry to disappoint everyone, but I don't know you/toot tsunami. I'm sure similar things have happened before. There's hundreds of thousands of people cruising at any given moment, and many of them are getting faced. I worked on a ship almost 15 years ago. Many stories. This happened to a friend of mine. A family came on. They had a teenage son who was not interested in the cruise. As soon as the family got to their room, he jumped off his balcony, which is insanely dangerous. They fished him out, and the family got kicked off the ship. Another fact, there is a small jail-like area called a brigadier. On my ship it was on the crew floor, and it had a one-way mirror. Usually it was used for drunk or disruptive passengers. We once had an entertainer find out his ex was coming on the ship. That made him a little stabby, so they put him in the brig until the next port. I worked on a cruise ship for 3 years. I've got a lot of these kinds of stories, but here's my favorite one. Our ship officers got a call from a ship of a completely different cruise line, off the coast of Cozumel, Mexico. They found one of our passengers floating in the ocean. He wasn't even near the shore at all, just floating in open water. He was alive and perfectly fine. They reviewed the security footage, and in the middle of the night this guy was drunk on deck 5 and could be seen holding his phone, dancing to music by himself. He then climbed onto one of the lifeboats and did a running jump into the ocean. He left his phone on top of the lifeboat. His body was so fluid from being drunk that he wasn't injured when he hit the water. The cruise ship spotted him and rescued him. His family didn't know he was missing because he had booked a separate room. This guy told the news that a rogue wave pushed him off the side of the ship. He was on deck 5, so the wave would have been over 40 feet tall. Don't know what happened after that. The entire crew was talking about it for weeks before it hit the news, though. Edit. Here's the article on the incident. Some of you are asking if it was a suicide attempt, and I don't believe it was. He was dancing for a while by himself and seemed to be just really drunk and having a good time. He was screaming for help when he was rescued, but ultimately he's the only one who would know. Edit 2. I'm relaying the information I heard through the grapevine from security and other crew members. I don't know if being drunk helped him survive the fall into the water. That's just what I was told from several people on board. I was playing a production show. Guitar was standing on stage with a wireless unit alone to play Purple Rain, and then all of a sudden the house lights came on and the curtains closed. Everyone in the audience looked at me, and I ran off the stage. Turns out a sewage pipe burst backstage and there was pus everywhere. Show was cancelled, and the passengers didn't find out why. We were sailing from Hawaii to San Francisco to dry dock and make repairs to our ship when a propeller crapped out a day and a half into what should have only been 7 days at sea, so it added a day and a half to the voyage. People were panicking. Everyone thought we were going to run out of food, until the captain reminded everyone we had enough food for a month at sea, and if it was any longer, some perishables might spoil, but they could fly in supplies in an emergency if needed. We arrived in San Francisco with no more delays. Anticlimactic, I know. On a side note, watching a giant cruise ship getting lifted out of the water to dry dock is surreal as hell. Also, sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge and looking up from the 13th deck was super surreal. I was hoping the whole time we were going to clear it. It was probably only about 50 feet above my head. Well, all the passengers found out, but on a QM2 transatlantic crossing one of the kitchen staff got drunk one night and hurled himself overboard in the North Atlantic. The ship basically found out the next morning when the first mate kept calling on the ship-wide intercom for him to go to his post. That afternoon, the captain announced what happened and that the ship was turning around to, with the help of 3 nearby merchant ships, try to search for him. Of course it was foggy as hell and you couldn't see 100 yards, but just about everyone was on the railings with binoculars trying to search for the poor guy. A wedding even stopped on board, the whole party out looking once the announcement came that we were in the search area. After shockingly nothing was found, the concierge desk set up a multinational currency donation box to send to his family back in Chile. There were 4 days left in the trip at that point, and every day, that box was stuffed to capacity. I hope it helped them. I was a cruise ship worker for a few years, and on a route between 2 cities there was a really bad storm. So a few minutes after the passengers got off, the storm got so rough that the ship was ripped off the docks and drifted out to sea. Because it takes quite a while to start up the engines, it took some time until we got back to the harbor. Not really dangerous, but if it had happened while the passengers were deboarding it could have gone badly. Edit. This happened in Sweden a few years back. Don't know enough about engines to explain why they take so long to start up, but to the people calling ps, here is an article about the incident in Swedish.